Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Podcast. I'm Scott McMahon, and I am so grateful Jeffrey Prather is with me today. Jeffrey, thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm really humbled and honored that you're here. I've been aware, I was telling you before we started, I've been aware of you and your work for some time. I know that you have a background. You were actually in the DIA, doing intelligence work in the DIA, yeah, I'd love to start, just if you could just kind of introduce yourself as far as, tell us a little bit about your experience with the DIA. I think most people don't know what it's about, what kind of work the DIA does. And kind of like to start with the broad strokes and then kind of zoom in towards the recent reporting that I've done on Mike Flynn and your experience with him as well. So, when did you get started with the DIA?
I was recruited into the DIA in about 91 or 92 and kind of got it back up. And so I was commissioned in 1984 as an Army officer, military intelligence branch. And I went on active duty because I'd already been to airborne school. I was already jump qualified as a cadet because a few cadets get to go. That enabled me to be selected easier for Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, because everybody in SOCOM is airborne. You got to be airborne. So I went straight into 4th Psychological Operations Group. So I served in PSYOPs in the 1st Battalion, which was the Latin American Battalion, and I commanded an airborne operational detachment, not a Special Forces Operational Detachment A team, but the corollary in PSYOPs. And that attached to the Rangers, and that attached to Special Forces, particularly 7th Group, because Latin America was hot then. And so I jumped and deployed a lot with both the Ranger Regiment, and 7th Special Forces Group all over Central and South America, particularly on the border of Honduras with Nicaragua, where I ran into the Contras and ended up working the Contra stuff. And at one point, right before Ollie North was testifying, and I had been undercover working back in a tunnel for months. And I had to come in and cut my hair and put on my Class A's and sit behind Colonel Fry, who was the SOC South commander, who was briefing the new Sync South. We don't have Syncs anymore, but at the time we did. And the whole thing was, hey, are we going to end up before Congress like Ollie North did? And the answer was no. We were doing everything legally. And so I have a different view of Ollie North than most people do, because he ran a rogue covert operation. And it's not so much that it's a covert operation as it was rogue. And it did so much damage. In my view, it built the Clinton cartel of death through the CIA, Contras, and cocaine in exchange for cash, while the Contras were illegal. And we were obviously working covert operations, but we were chartered to do them correctly. And a Marine staff colonel in the White House knows nothing about covert operations. Special Forces, though, it's something that they do a lot of. So what happened was I'd been working that. Panama invasion was coming up. I went over to Fort Sherman and saw another team training some long-haired guys. I thought they were CIA. Turned out to be DEA Snowcap. DEA ended up recruiting me. I left active duty in 90 as a captain. Went straight into the Drug Enforcement Administration as a special agent. And at the same time, I was staying in the reserves. And the drug war was really hot then. And so I was recruited into a special unit. It was called the Foreign Operations Group, FOG back then, which then became Foreign International Agency, which was FIA. And that went on to become some other special operations intelligence. And then they split, and part of that went into support special operations and operations, and part of that went to the Defense Intelligence Agency's clandestine human services, and I went with clandestine human services. Really didn't have much choice, but when I was recruited into that, I was recruited because my background in special forces, and I'd been to some special forces shooting schools, and so there was part of that went into a tier 1 intelligence unit that supports Combat Operations Group, commonly known as Delta Force, and 6, commonly known as Dove Group and stuff. And then the other part of it went to the DIA, and I went into human services, clandestine human services. And they go to the same, they go to the farm, they go to the same case officer schools. And a lot of people don't understand what this is, but a case officer, operations officer is who runs human sources of operations. The difference between the CIA and the DIA is the CIA is really focused working for the president. The DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, is full of military guys working for the defense of the country. Inside, in the profession, the DIA is much better than the CIA. We don't really have a lot of respect for the CIA, just like inside cops don't really respect the FBI a lot. And also similarly in the special operations community, the SEALs have had a lot of problems, even though there's some good ones, but Delta and Green Berets are, and AFSOC are fabulous. So that's how I kind of ended up in the DIA. And so it was pretty unique because I was dual credentialed. While I was credentialed as a Drug Enforcement Administration special agent, badge and gun, I was also credentialed as a Defense Intelligence Agency intelligence collector. And so when I would do something, either CONUS, Continental United States, or OCONUS, because I then joined the DEA's Operation Snowcap, which is a paramilitary program where you go work with host nation, police, and military to interdict cocaine labs, and you work out of embassies and stuff. I could do a lot of things legally under a lot of hats because I was dual credentialed, and very few people have had those dual credentials like I have, and have had that breadth of experience. So that's how I ended up in the DIA.
Well, I have a feeling we could talk for a long time. I'm really enjoying listening to you talk about it. But so you mentioned Oliver North, and that this rogue operation that he was on, is that an extreme exception, or is that something that happens? Are there other cases that you know of where an operation actually goes rogue and is...
Well, I say rogue, but really Reagan told him to do that. And so, as my friend Michael Young says, false flags are the common, not the exception. And Reagan did so I was really fortunate. I came into the military under Reagan in '84, in the buildup. It was a great time to come into the military. Everybody's volunteer. He ran all kinds of covert operations. The Navy did a lot of covert operations. They didn't get the visibility that the Iran-Contra got, but there was a lot of that, and it was pressuring Russia at the time, which was very legitimate because Soviet Union fell. That was acceptable, and so we went back to Russians, which were our allies in World War II. A lot of people forget. And it kind of devolved into a gangster state, but it has since changed from that. But no, Reagan had a lot of, I forget, they faked a Russian submarine running ashore someplace and to make it look like it was the Russians, when no Russian submarine commander would run a boat ashore like that. A lot of pressure, but that was all designed to collapse the Soviet Union. It worked. It was a great strategy, very successful. No problems with that.
Right. So, when was it? When were you? When did you get involved with the DIA? Was that still in the 90s?
Yeah, like 92, like that, 91, 92.
Okay.
Because those organizations went from specialized Army units into the DIA, where all human services. So there's different types of intelligence. But what I like to say is it's all human intelligence. And so all the services have some human intelligence. There's some specialized MICEP, great skills programs in the Army stuff, specializing for that. And the Army is the big landmass. So they have the biggest amount of that going on. And they're much more capable, I think, than the CIA. CIA mostly comes from the Ivy Leagues, and they're kind of not... We don't really like them. And the DIA comes from, soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen. Coast Guardsmen who, have much more of an patriotic ethic and selfless service duty.
Right. What is the role of the Office of Net Assessment in the intelligence community?
The net assessment,
Yes.
that's looking at cyber. I think that's looking at cyber net structure. And the reason why that's become so important is because it used to be, 50s or 60s, it's James Bond, it's Berlin, it's some case officer getting somebody to betray their country. That's no longer the big thing. After Second Gulf War, it was interrogators and strategic debriefers in a post-conflict environment, grabbing guys and debriefing them and interrogating them. I'm not a hero, but I got some heroes. My NCO, Eric Maddox, found Saddam because he was on the tail of a tier 1 team, and he interrogated the guy and it slipped, and they found him in the hole because of that. DIA provided the camera that showed Jessica Lynch alive so that they could launch that op. And that was an awesome op too, because some of the troops stuck around to dig up the bodies of the other folks. A lot of people don't know that, but that's how dedicated they were. I just think that's awesome. They dug them up with their hands because they didn't have stuff on them. So a net assessment is to look at somebody's cyber capability, because today, it's OSINT. It's open source information because of all of the electronic devices. The OSINT is king today, not clandestine UMINT or anything like that, or interrogations.
Okay. So I ask about the Office of Net Assessment because they from what the stories that I've read, that they paid in August of 2015, they paid Mike Flynn to go to Russia and to give a speech in Russia. And that they also were the source of the funds for Stefan Halper that ended up going to Carter Page as part of the Crossfire Hurricane. And one of the things that I was reporting on was that Mike Flynn was Crossfire Razor, and so he was. So I've been just wondering if you had, through your experience with the DIA, if you had any experience with the Office of Net Assessment. I've been very curious how the Office of Net Assessment actually fits in with all of that, and wondering anything that any light you could shed on that.
And also, I know General Flynn. I mean, I've done lots of interviews with him. He and I have been on Clay Clark. I've interviewed him on my former show, The Prather Brief, on AMP, of which has gone Patriot TV, which now he's part of, and I'm not. I quit because I was censored, and I talk to him backstage all the time, at events. We're friendly. So, I want to put that out there. But when you look at offices like that, like the Office of Net Assessment, or you look at, hey, he's paid to go do this, that's not going to be what's really happening. It's just like the military launches an exercise. Like, when I was in Honduras, we were always on an exercise. Well, we were conducting real world operations under the guise of that exercise, all the time. So it's very tough to see, what was going on there. So with Trump and Russia, those relations were very good. And he may have been part of that. With Turkey at that time, that's not my region of expertise. Latin America is. But I believe Turkey was kind of ambivalent between. And so that may have been something he was doing. I'm not by any means carrying water for General Flynn. I'm just saying that when you are looking at intelligence personnel doing stuff like that, what you see on the surface is not necessarily what's happening by any means. And that also goes for, Flynn Group, getting paid 500 or some thousand or whatever to Turkey at all. I will say, my interactions with Flynn, and we have off the book conversations about stuff. He, I've been around generals, and generals are generally political figures. They're often not that well informed, which I'm not making excuses. General Boykin is somebody I know that I'm always very impressed with. He was INSCOM commander, Delta Force commander, went to churches on Sunday in Class A's and said, we're going to win because our God's not their God. I mean, that guy's, awesome. But beyond the constellation of staff around political figures such as Trump and such as Flynn, who are controlled, and I hold Trump accountable for the bioweapon, and I have lots of problems with Flynn's stuff. There are other things happening, and it would be nearly impossible for him not to be aware of the ramifications, and other people around him to be aware of that as well. So now, what the motivations are for that, when DEA went after me and ended up eventually firing me after 19 years on the job, with never ever charging me, with never ever convicting me, with not even a bad evaluation. It started with outside employment, which I had authorization for because I was teaching. My Warrior School company was training guys who were deploying because I'm a longtime firearms instructor. So I see a lot of similarities. I'm very empathetic with Flynn. I can tell you that because he puts his paperwork late. I put my paperwork in late. DEA went after me, lied about me. FBI went after him. I can see. I'm very empathetic. Now, why he was doing that, I think. I think a lot of that was self-interest. I think Flynn wants to take care of Flynn, like Trump wanted to take care of Trump. People now kind of make Trump into a saint when they forget, what he was all about before. And Trump refocused himself and saw, hey, the American people are sick of politicians. I remember doing speeches way back, and I was kind of saying Cruz, and my audience would go, no, Trump. And I'm like, why? And they'd go, because Cruz is a politician. I'd go, Cruz, constitutionalist, Christian, Kerry guy. And they're like, nope, we're done with politicians. But there's plenty of problems with Trump. But Trump became an ally because of the bad guys attacking him. And I think it's very similar with Flynn. So when I first deployed to the Las Vegas salient, and we landed in a CH-47 and we couldn't fit Hummers in there, so we had to drive around in a red and a white Toyota Hilux, which was great for enemy territory. And we're getting shot at. We don't know who's shooting at us, but generally speaking, because you can get on comms pretty quick if it's green on green, blue on blue, you can straighten that out. But if they keep shooting at you, you're pretty sure that they're the bad guys. And if they're shooting at somebody else with you, you're pretty sure that they're the good guys. And that's what it's like in real life. It's not a movie. There's not subtitles and you don't really know. So when I look at Trump or when I look at Flynn and see who's shooting at them, Obama, definitely bad. Biden, definitely bad. I then conclude that they're on our side. Now, are they good guys? Well, at this time, they are good guys. And I say they are allies. And I've been privileged and honored to interview some of the original horse soldiers that went to Afghanistan, and how did they build? The first thing they had to do, they dropped down and they got to build rapport with these guys. And the first thing is nice beard. Start with the build rapport with nice beard. And so that's how I look at that. I certainly don't excuse all the behavior, but I know that there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And I think at this point, they are forced into a positive camp. Although I've had Mike Gill on my show and I'd have him back to say that, he thinks Flynn is behind all the J6 stuff. And I don't really understand that, but I'd be willing to listen to it.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned false flags earlier, and let's first, because false flags are just so confusing. And that's by nature, right? I mean, their whole intention is to confuse, right?
Yep.
So what exactly, let's just start very basic. What is a false flag? What is a false flag operation?
A false flag is a falsified event to get you to get into something. For example, the Tonkin Gulf incident that got us into the Vietnam War was a false flag. It was a generated event to bring the U.S. conventional troops into the Vietnam War. Before that, it had just been Special Forces, Green Berets, and they wanted to have mission creep to bring everybody else in. I That's a great question, because I called October 7th very early on as a false flag. It
That
has
was the
since
Hamas
been,
invasion of Israel.
yes, that was,
Yeah.
they called it their 9/11. And I have since talked about, along with a lot of other people, that a lot of 9/11 was a false flag, that FBI, CIA, Mossad were all in on it, and the same actors were in on October 7th. And here's an example of what I mean by Flynn being an ally. And so an ally is not necessarily my friend, but he's the enemy of my enemy. And that's what we did with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. We had allies, and that's real important to understand. So I'll give you an example of why I say General Flynn is an ally, is because when I still had my American Media Periscope show, which I quit because they censored me, and then General Flynn came in over Patriot TV, and that's just the way that stuff goes. I don't bear him any. I'd already quit. Maybe he hesitated because I was the most popular show and he didn't want to come on yet. I don't know. Haven't talked to him about it, but it's no skin off my nose. I don't care. But he did come on the show, and I had said, "Hey, I want to," and I, just like you did before, and I appreciate your integrity, by the way. I do the same thing. I had him on, and I said, "Hey, here's where I want to go. I'm not going to ambush you. I don't do that." And he goes, "I don't want to talk about that. I've already done it." I'm like, "Okay, we won't talk about that." But then we went on, and I said, "Hey, I'm saying, knowing the Israeli border and having worked the Nogales, Arizona, Sonora border for 10 years, that was a setup. And there's IDF guys saying that work the border that are saying that." And he goes, "Yeah, I agree with you totally. In fact, there's a 7-hour stand down. I've walked that border. I agree with you." And so that was probably the most significant intelligence brief I gave last year, backed up by a former establishment head of intelligence, head of the DIA, not when I was there, but later on, that made a very important impact on what's going on, because I say they're trying to create a religious war in America because their race war, trying to emulate the race war going on in South Africa, has failed. And so they instigated this religious war because there are racial overtones to it. And he agreed with me on that. So I don't know what he did in the past, but on that show then, he was definitely a lie, because and I just got a thing from one of my guys today on Team America saying, "I think you're putting out October 7th so early, and Flynn backing you up really took the wind out of the sails of a lot of the deep state of where they were going with that." And I hope that's right. And so in that regard, he was really helpful. And that was really good work, because Israel was chosen by God, but America chose God, and God says life and freedom are good. And so I try to be on God's side, as a sinner and everything, and I'm trying to do the best I can with what I'm doing and still serving my country. And in that event, he could easily have not come on. He could have easily said nothing, but he took a stand and affirmed my intelligence, and that was significant. And that is a solid ally as far as I'm concerned.
Mm. So if we're looking at, if we define our allies by in part, at least, by who our enemies are, who are the enemies? Who is the enemy?
Well, the ultimate enemy is the adversary. So I'm a Christian chaplain, and so I think that the Satan and the fallen angels that then come in to find the daughters of man as fit extensions is really the best translation, not attractive. And then they bear they are born the giants, and then the remnants, which turn out to be old empires of human sacrifice, which then grow into ancient families, hyper ancient, hyper rich families that try to obtain more immortality, which then devolve down into all the different evil societies, which then devolve down into the international intelligence agencies, which then devolve down into the heads of state. That's how I look at that.
Fascinating. I haven't seen that that succinctly, going from, creating a direct lineage. Actually, what you're saying, there's a direct lineage from Satan all the way through, and actually you're suggesting even a physiological lineage of sorts, from Satan and the fallen angels all the way to so is that what a lot of people refer to as the Illuminati then? That.
Well, the Illuminati are way below that, but that's the Nephilim, and that's so if you don't have a moral basis code, all this looks like craziness and insane and chaos. If you have what I call a Mosaic, Christic, and North American tribal warrior code, which is 10 commandments, 2 Christic commandments, 2 warrior commandments, and then you look at history in that line, it all lines up. For example, Baal the bull, the Wall Street bull, is the fallen demigod of the fallen council of greed. Moloch is the child sacrifice, and then the Ishtar, the fallen demonic demigod of transgenderism, pops right up. It all fits into exactly what's going on. It's why California just took down the Appeal to Heaven flag. It's why chaplains aren't supposed to say the name of Yeshua. It all fits completely. If you don't have that, then it just looks like a mess, and you have no straight line to measure all the crookeds against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I consider myself to be a born again Christian, in just a Bible believing Christian, and because the Bible has proven itself to me to be true, through just in-depth rational study and historical analysis. But so in terms of today, in the world, because we're looking at allies and enemies. So who is the enemy today in the world? Like who is the they today that that we should ally against?
Well, so the nation state, our main nation state, yeah. So this is my job as an intelligence officer: is who are the enemies to, and then friend and foe. That's exactly the job. And so the primary nation state enemy is China. And China too was our ally in World War II. But I think I know why they became our enemy, if you want to hear that, as a nation state. But a while back, I switched my priority from nation state preeminence of enemy to non-nation state transnational organizations, and that is the global cabal, or the WEF and the United Nations and all of that. And I switched that when I saw Moderna, which used to be run by the military, which was run by the intelligence community, which was run by DARPA, BARDA, ARDA, go into China, and China is failing. So I actually switched my preeminence of, so if you're being overrun, you shoot the closest guy to you first. So I used to say China, and now I say global cabal. And that goes from Sun Tzu to the unrestricted warfare doctrine. I'm sure you're familiar with the unrestricted. Okay. Yeah. And that comes from them watching us win the first Gulf War. And then that is executed by the 1,000 Talents program. And right. It has been ingenious, and it's open. It's not clandestine. It's an open human program, and it has worked brilliantly. But even beyond them, which we could handle, we could handle nation state enemies. We could even handle non-nation transnational regional, which is what is replacing the nation state today. But The real problem is the traitors who have infiltrated us via espionage and interdicted all of our institutions by capturing them and sabotaging them. So the other thing I do is I do competitive intelligence only for the good guys in GRIN, in genetics, robotics, information, nanotechnology. And the basic thing I do is counter espionage and counter sabotage. And so all of our institutions, especially Congress, but now the presidency, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, have all been infiltrated via espionage, interdicted through sabotage. And so that's why I say our republic has fallen. And a lot of people still don't get that. And I don't think Trump got that either, too. After Trump really won the election, but was not allowed to win. Trump thought he was running against Biden. He wasn't running against Biden. Biden can't run against anybody, whoever it is, a double, Pedo Joe, whatever. He's not running against that. He's running against an apparatus. And I don't think he recognized that. And he also still had faith in institutions. Now, he did start to clear out several layers of Obama's guys, but he said, I still believe in these institutions. Now, I believe in them too. I served all of my career in military, federal law enforcement, intelligence, all executive branch stuff. But I certainly knew clearly that the top was totally corrupted. And now the bottom really is totally corrupted as well. And to think that that's going to work without drastic revisions is crazy, is doing the same thing over and over with the same result.
Right. It sounds like you would probably agree, at least to some extent, that with me, that the biggest the biggest issue, at least in this year's election, is overcoming and really disassembling the deep state as it exists. This institutional organizational rot that is now the executive branch of the federal government.
Not just the executive branch, but most of Congress. Congress is full of spies that are being run all over the place. And George Webb has done a great job of showing that. The judiciary less so, but the judiciary are extorted all the time. The judiciary got protesters threaten their lives outside their homes, which is certainly illegal. Marshals aren't supposed to let that to happen. But the DOJ, which I was under, has been totally interdicted and infiltrated as well. And the Chinese are the most obvious of whom have done that, but they are hardly the only ones that have done that. And that's why it's hard to look at Flynn going into Turkey or meeting with Putin and say that's bad, because you don't really know what's going on with that and what's really happening there. It's very hard to look beneath the surface and see what that's about. But again, I'm not making excuses for him, but going undercover, is pretending to be one of the best. I say Schindler them. I'm trying to get people to understand that concept, because people will contact me and say, hey, the hospital's corrupt. And if I'm quitting the hospital, I'm like, don't quit the hospital, stay in place. And Schindler them. Work for the Nazis while saving Jews, if you're smart enough and brave enough to do that. But that's a very difficult, just like the concept of a lie is very difficult for people. But I've lived in this world my entire career. So for me, it's kind of second nature, but there's good guys, there's good bad guys, there's bad good guys, and there's bad guys. And that changes weekly depending upon the dynamics of what's going on. Right. I think Trump and Flynn have been forced into becoming allies.
So you think that they're allies now? They're allies.
So if you look at war, and I say we're in World War IV, fifth generation war against fourth generation resistance, legal, moral, ethical. So the choices are basically Pedo versus Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Easy.
Right. Do you see, have you been in communication with Flynn recently?
No.
Okay. one of my concerns, and one of the things that I've researched and talked about quite a bit is how the um, the infiltration that's happened within state Republican parties, uh, where people are recruited in to become delegates for the purpose of kicking out the rhinos, but who they define rhinos as is anybody who has been who doesn't complete commit to being 100% on their side on every issue. And that is a movement that is trying to has many different objectives, including trying to drive the Republican Party farther and farther to the right so that it's no longer a viable electoral alternative to what the Democrats are dishing out, through purity tests and and that kind of thing. But another key aspect of what they're doing, and then they drive out. They're basically what they're working at doing is driving out all of the talent and treasure from the state parties, um, driving out the people that are the most effective, replacing them with new people that they can control. And it's been a really fascinating thing to study. But they have these chaos agents that they have trained, and they train them in Saul Alinsky type methods, and they create chaos in county conventions, district conventions, state conventions, and it is very clear that they're planning on creating chaos in the national convention. And Flynn is really like it's one of those things that all these spokes come back to Flynn at the center in the America Project. I was listening to a X space that they put on last night in response to Trump's conviction, and there were people from multiple states talking about how many they call them grassroots, but they're not necessarily grassroots, in terms of how they, if you look at how they really operate within the state party. They think that they're grassroots, but they've become, it's been a psychological operation to make them into something other than the grassroots, that I believe is anti-grassroots. They say that they're for Trump, but there's also this sense of I'm with Trump until I'm not. And so I've been very concerned actually for about 3 months about the national convention because of the types of people that they're choosing as national delegates, who have been the same people that have instigating and creating chaos in state conventions, district conventions, county conventions. So that's kind of some background leading to, I guess, you know, I'm just wondering if you have any insight and experience on your end through, psychological operations that you've seen as and the little bit that I've shared with you here. And I know you're not fully, you know, uh, up to speed with the research that I've done at this point, but um, how the national convention, it really, in light of Trump's conviction, in light of the sentencing happening 4 days before the national convention on July 11th, and the chaos that's clearly intended. The whole all of Trump's conviction. That really feels like this was a predetermined outcome. Um, yeah, there's a jury, but I mean, the judge was so heavy-handed in the whole process, and in and who knows to what extent jurors were actually manipulated. There's so much that we don't know. We don't even know what the jurors were actually voting for.
Yeah.
I mean, just the whole thing is just so crazy. But yeah, I'd like to hear you talk about Trump's conviction, how that fits in, how you see that fitting in with the national convention. The people obviously voted for Trump. Trump was selected as the nominee by the American voters through in just about every state. Really, I mean, he won every state pretty much, and um, and by a bigger margin than any recent presidential nominee. What do you think are the odds that Trump that someone else takes the nomination? Um, and um, and could it be Flynn? And
Yeah, no, that's a great. So, George Webb, Mike Adams, and well, they're both friends of mine, and we do talk quite a bit. They think Flynn is going to run. They've always thought that. And then Clay Clark, I don't know. if he thinks that, but he's certainly super pro Trump. And of course, super pro Flynn, because Flynn is the centerpiece of all the Reawaken tours. So I don't think that. I've just never thought that. I just don't see, you know, I'm not that impressed with generals or admirals. You know, that's why I retired as a major, because I just didn't want to go through all the crap to be colonels, and it becomes very political, and I was never really interested in that. I don't see him running. I don't see him being picked. I certainly see Trump's popularity building even more. And this goes into understanding human nature and following biblical truth and this is the basis for unconventional warfare doctrine, is the more repressive the tyrannical state becomes, the more the resistance builds. And so, and resistance is like it's like mercury. You squish it down in one place, it rises someplace up. And now, so the left, they are Satanists, they are human secularists, they don't believe in biblical truth, they don't believe in history, they don't believe in human nature, and they don't get this. But the more they do to Trump, the more popular he will become. And I think he will continue I don't think they're going to stop the nomination. I also don't think there'll ever be a revenge tour. I don't think they're going to let him win. I think they're going to cheat electronically. Voting machines are all over the place. However, another crisis. I don't think there's going to be any revenge tour, but I think he will continue to be popular. But let me continue with the idea. And so I'm all about the resistance. So what I'm saying is, because I'm studying history, and particularly Sir John Glubb, Fate of Empires, they all fall about 250, 275 years, regardless. That is it, before self-sacrifice is replaced by selfishness and self-indulgence, and we are there. And if you look at human nature, fallen nature of man, and then if you look at Scripture, Revelation, which I say has been activated with Israel becoming a state in a day at the end of World War II, then it is going to fall. So then what can we do? Well, I want to raise my kids so that they can endure and survive the fall for what happens afterwards. And so, and they gotta survive that. And so Team America is about the resistance. It's about remaining through all the continuing chaos. And I've said this for a long time. It's not going to be Mad Max. It's going to be Venezuela. And I've worked Venezuela. And America is starting to look a lot like Venezuela, let me tell you. And so what I'm saying is being played out. But let's play out for a second Flynn getting in there. So Flynn clearly affirmed, yeah, October 7th was a setup and a stand down of 7 hours, and they had to do it. He confirmed that very openly. But Trump and RFK are all behind of, hey, let's get avengement. Let's kill all those guys off. And they're all really to go for the next war overseas, which is Israel and Gaza. And also the FBI is bringing on in terrorists all the time. How does he align what he said with deep state stuff? I don't know how that works. Do you see why that's an important point? Because
Sure.
what I'm saying is, because now they're saying, hey, there's some terrorists that got across the southern border. Well, yeah, you brought them in. You bring them in every day. Just like now they're saying there's 11 Russian submarines off the coast. Well, here's news for you. There's subs all over there. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, there could have been Russian subs off the coast. It doesn't matter. What's the timing now? Is why are they promoting it now? Well, they want to promote the idea of nuclear war, but do they want a nuclear war? No. Why? Because war on the home soil, then they're not necessarily in control anymore. So they got to walk this tightrope without enough chaos where they bring about false flags, but they still remain in charge. But if it's real war and real chaos, then who knows how that turns out for them. That's why they want everything, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Gaza, and then little events over here that they control, but they don't want a full-fledged anything here.
Right.
That's very, very significant. And so I think Trump will be the nominee. I don't think Flynn has the charisma to do that. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you that he doesn't have the charisma to do that. But just it definitely, the bus tour, the Reawaken tour, all of there's certainly a lot of effort going into making him at a minimum a figurehead, within the conservative populist movement. And
well, that's a great question. So may I respond to that?
Absolutely.
So that's all true. And so, I was privileged to be invited to the first Reawaken tour. And at the speaker's dinner, I tell this story all the time. I'm standing there with Flynn and Lindell, and it's a speaker's dinner. It's not even the event yet. And my wife goes up to Flynn and goes, what you just went through with the FBI, my husband went through a decade ago with the DEA, and God has kept you for this. And then Flynn called up all our kids and said, this is why I'm doing this. That really meant a lot. And he could be faking it all, but he looks pretty sincere to me. And I think he's been forced to become more sincere and less political than he was back in the day. But Clay, who is also a friend, and I don't go to many of those events. I've spoken at a few, and it's really cool to speak to 5,000 people, but Clay says Flynn is the centerpiece of those. But what comes with Flynn is Prather, with his intelligence analysis, with Mike Adams. I know Mike and I were both kind of coming out on the spotlight at the first one. A lot of other luminaries that bring a lot of light to the darkness of the deep state. And so, for example, I don't agree with everything Clay says or does. Like, his guys are into the Pentecostal speaking in tongues. Scripturally, somebody's supposed to be able to understand what's being said there. If you look at that's Paul too, saying that. And if it isn't, but they're into that. So, but that's not my problem. My problem is when I go to speak that I'm going to tell everybody what the best truth I know. And I've done one where it was the seduction of evil versus the sanctification of God process with a big slide in the background. I thought that was really important to put out, because if you don't have a basis of being connected to God through Christ, I don't see how you're going to make it. Clay centerpiecing Flynn, and then all of the rest of us following along allowed that to happen. Is Clay an ally? Definitely. Is Clay a friend? Yeah, I just had some problems with something. He called me up himself to take care of that, because his assistants couldn't do it. And other times when I've had problems, he's called me up. So do I agree that the first Reawaken, there's a guy up on stage with a tallit on. My wife was raised Jewish, so we know what tallits are and how to use them and everything. I've got mine. He's got it over his head. He's kneeling at the front of the stage. And I'm like, he's doing exactly what Yeshua said not to do. Just exactly. But he's not my problem. My problem is to get up there and do my stuff. And then the audience has got to figure out who's there, who's right and who's wrong, and so that's why. And you got to work in those environments. If you're going to work in intelligence, if you're going to work in law enforcement, especially federal law enforcement, where it's all about sources, you've got to be able to be in that mix. But if you don't have a strong moral core and a connection to God, then it's real easy to get lost and get turned real fast. And Flynn's 7 lights of prayer thing was a mess, as well. Does that help?
Yeah. Well, I think that and with the last report, I don't. Did you see my last report on Flynn? Just the most recent one was last Friday.
Yeah.
So
I published it on my stuff. I thought it was great.
Yeah, thank you. So and that really went into the both the connections. The two things was the connections with the chaos agents in multiple states that I've studied in the Republican Party, and then the connections, the Crossfire Razor, and his how really every connection between Trump and Russia came through Flynn. If it weren't for Crossfire Razor, there would have been no Crossfire Hurricane. And so that was, I think that's a pretty important thing. I mean that he called the Russian ambassador in an obvious effort um, to interfere in the work that Obama was, whether Obama was right or wrong, in the sanctions that he was placing against Russia, or and so he was calling to try to convince Russia not to retaliate against Obama and against the United States. And he had no legal authority to do that. He was directly interfering in, with another head of state, and he didn't tell Trump about it. And this was after Trump was elected.
Kind of like how Miley called China, the Chinese general, under Trump, right?
Miley. Oh, Milley. You mean General Milley?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So again, under Ollie North runs a rogue operation that Reagan doesn't know about.
Right.
No.
Right.
He knows about it, but he wants plausible deniability.
Sure.
All of those things got to be factored in. But Trump built great relations with Russia. The relations were excellent
once he was in office. Yeah. So are you suggesting that Trump actually did know about those calls?
Maybe. Again, plausible. Here's how it goes. I sure would like this to happen, but I can't. I mean, there's movies about that. What's the Clear and Present Danger?
Sure.
What's his name? Harrison Ford came to our mount out of Snowcap because it was basically, that was a covert operation. We did overts, but again, it's very hard from the outside to see what's really going on there in that regard of what's really happening. But yeah, he may have known about that.
Well, I think that had there been any way that they could have proven that would have been a much more impeachable offense. I think had there been any way to prove that would the FBI would have been all over that had they proven that at all. That would have been a much more direct tie than anything else that they had on Trump.
Well, something I say all the time right now is Putin and the Russians are our allies very clearly, because they've exposed the biolabs that Obama and Lugar put in there in 2005. And the U.S. Defense Threat Production Program, which is really a bioweapon program, which is really being used against the American people through DARPA, BARDA, ARDA, was Moderna, still going on. And so while Putin, who is an ex-KGB guy, says there are no ex-KGB guys, and he's right, and he is not a good guy, he is an ally of America because he's against the trannyism, he's against the bioweapons, and he's certainly against the Biden-Obama deep state regime as well, while he's had good relations with Trump. There's a conversation that was reported when Trump was still in office where Putin said, hey, I think we killed some, I don't know if this conversation actually happened or not, but it was reported. And it was Putin saying, hey, my guys killed some American contractors over in Ukraine. And I just wanted you to know we didn't mean to do that. And we're sorry about that. And Trump supposedly said, hey, if they were contractors, they weren't military, it's okay, no problem. I don't know if that actually happened, but it sounds exactly like a conversation that would occur to maintain those relationships. And what have we seen since Trump was cheated out of his reelection? Those rascally Russians are the bad guy for everything. And again, I'm not carrying water for Russia either, but it's ridiculous with everything they accuse the Russians of, when a lot of it is China, and a lot of it is WEF, all of that as well, and Israel for that matter.
Yeah, I think that, and I know we're getting close to time here, but yeah, I do. I think I probably land a lot closer to George Webb when he says that it was, um, that the whole everything that Flynn did, he had all of these ties to Russia that really didn't seem to accomplish anything except for tainting himself with the stain of Russia, so that they could blame Trump for everything that they did for the uranium one, for for everything that Hillary Clinton and Obama did, and Biden, and try to put that on Trump and demonize Russia, tying really the conservative populist movement to Russia, so that they could demonize Russia, demonize the conservative populist movement, demonize Trump, just kind of cover us all in that stain. And it really started with Crossfire Razor. So
yeah,
but
that's a good point. And Mike Gill says that too. I've had Mike Gill on once. He doesn't want to come back on. I don't quite understand Mike Gill's, your point. I understand, Gill grabs these documents and takes them to an FBI office. It's kind of a showy kind of way of doing things. George Webb is a very serious, detailed journalist. And I talk to George all the time too. And I see those points as well. I think those are very valid points.
yeah. Well, I would love to have more conversations with you. I think this was a lot of fun. I think I've heard you say before that, talk about the importance of being able to disagree civilly and, have conversations with people that we don't agree with on everything. And I think that we just succeeded to some extent on that. And I enjoyed talking with you quite a bit. And I feel that I have a lot more to learn from you. And I hope to have that experience. So thank you very much for coming on, and I hope this was good for the audience. And this will be on the Substack, biggertruth.substack.com. I would appreciate joining there. I'm about to do a members only. I'm long overdue for a members only podcast, so I'm about to do that this afternoon. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Jeffrey, for coming on. This was a joy. So do you have any final thoughts of how can people contact you? I almost forgot.
They can go to jeffreyprather.com. They can go to patreon.com/Jeffrey Prather. I've got my Great American Meetup coming up June 7th and 9th in Tulsa. Any of those as well. No, and thanks for having me. And I'm willing to listen and learn and change my mind. I have an open mind, and I'm trying to understand what's going on, and hopefully I've shown you, where I'm at and why I do what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I think it took a lot of humility. So, that is humility is a very underrated character trait. And I think it's the most important. So, again, thank you very much. And we will be in touch. So thanks a lot, Jeffrey.
Thank you.